Sonic Forces. If you've seen this video, you probably know I don't like Sonic Forces. I think it's the absolute worst Sonic game. Yes, I have played 06, and I have found that Sonic Forces, it might be one of the most mixed Sonic games. A lot of people, like me, don't like it. A lot of them are neutral, and others try and defend this game. But anyways, Sonic Forces came out on November 7th, 2017, and was made by Sonic Team and explicitly advertised as the same team behind Sonic Generations and Sonic Colors, which is not entirely accurate. But of the trailers for the game, and how Sega treated this game at the time, you would probably get the idea that this would have been one of the greatest Sonic games of all time. The game looked sick as hell. The game had tons of hype for it, hype that was well placed considering how insane the advertising was. Plus, the game looked like it was going to be the game that saved Sonic, especially after games like Sonic Lost World and especially the Boom games. Plus, following up Sonic Mania, which only released a few months earlier, opinions and most importantly, expectations were pretty high for Sonic. And we all know Sonic Forces did not live up to that hype, far from it in fact. It was such a disappointment that some Sonic fans had trust issues going into the advertisement for Frontiers and Shadow Gens. But, was Forces truly that bad? I mean, I want to say yes, but for this video, I want to give Sonic Forces a fair review. Also, this is technically a continuation from my original Sonic ranking series, though this is going to have a different formula, as I will cover Forces going through the different aspects of the game, talking about them from best to worst in my opinion, starting with God. Saying the best part of a game is the music is honestly kind of sad, but Forces does have a pretty good soundtrack, which is honestly not saying much considering it's a Sonic game. So you may have heard some complaints, or have complained yourself, about the overuse of synth in the Forces soundtrack, which, you know, maybe throwing in some more instruments would have made a lot of the songs better, mainly guitars. Shadow Gens kind of proved that with Sunset Heights, but you know what? I like the synth, and I think it's used well within the soundtrack. And each character does something a little different with their respective level music, so I will go over my favorite 3 tracks for each character. For Modern Sonic, I would say Sunset Heights, Eggate, and Network Terminal Exterior. And choosing for Classic Sonic, I would say, is a bit harder, but I would go with, I think, Ghost Town, Battle with Dragoon Mark II, and I guess Chemical Flow. All of Shadow's themes are remixes, and I would have to go with Enemy Territory, Eggman's Facility, and Virtual Reality. And I have an interesting little tidbit about the Avatar's themes. Since they are mostly a silent character, their level themes have vocals designed to give insight as to what the avatar is thinking during that stage. Also, I would just say the avatar is the best themes. Here are some examples.
Let evil win, take them out. This is justice, this is what's right. Here comes the enemy, mess them up. And bring them to the knees, do your stuff. Time for justice, time to go fight. It's real, it's all a game. We will win, make no mistake. You must trust your heart, not what you see. Just a crazy fantasy. We will win, I guarantee. Nothing can defeat reality.
Also, these examples are my favorite Avatar themes. This game's main theme, Fist Bump, is also pretty good. I don't think it compares to some of the other main themes, but it is still pretty good and I like Fist Bump. Infinite's theme is also pretty good, though before the game came out, Sega released the song on YouTube, which both made some people think Infinite was supposed to be an old enemy that Sonic had fought in the past due to these lyrics.
And after all this time, you're back for more. Only scars remain of the war. We're finding the ashes of this.
And also fully revealed the whole illusion aspect of the Phantom Ruby with these.
So look around you and tell me what you really see. You live the lie and that's the difference in you and me.
And who can forget?
This is an illusion, open up your eyes.
And you might not have actually heard the full songs from this game. As the levels are so short, or even the sections that use some of these songs are so short, you barely get to hear them. I think this is most notable with Arsenal Pyramid Exterior and Red Gate Bridge, both getting entirely cut off before they even get the chance to get to the good parts. And songs like Lost Valley and Eggate actually have endings, which don't play in game, the song just keeps looping. Not that you would reach the point of the song which it would end anyways, but I think that is enough about the music. The game has good music, the Sonic game. But it is somewhat mixed, it depends on if you like the synth or not. Once again, I think it's pretty sad this is one of the high points of Forces. But if it wasn't, that would be a much bigger conversation, considering Sonic Forces was in development for 4 years. 3 of those years were dedicated specifically to Hedgehog Engine 2, which is just the graphics engine. And I do think it looks good in Sonic Forces. The later games that have used it better, but Forces was a good second try. The first game to use Hedgehog Engine 2 was Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, which released the year before Sonic Forces. But oh well, Sonic Forces has good graphics. Though I have seen many people say games like Generations or Unleashed look better, and I agree. I mean, look, the whole city's on fire, and it looks good, don't get me wrong. Other things like space or the sun also look pretty good. However, even though Forces has pretty good graphics, there are some pretty big issues, or at the very least points of contention. First of all, the general art direction and style, which as opposed to Unleashed and Generations trying to be more realistic looking, Forces goes for a more simplistic and cartoony art style. It's basically an in-between with the more realistic art direction of Unleashed and Generations and the heavily cartoony Lost World, which the change is especially apparent in places like Green Hill, which can be directly compared to Generations, or the UI, which is just flat colors, and yeah, I think it just looks actively worse. Then there are the cutscenes, which I have a lot more to say about those in the story section, but for now, all the characters are very stiff and pretty lifeless. Like in concept, an all-out battle between Sonic and friends versus hundreds of Phantom copies does seem kinda cool, but in game, Plus, in actual gameplay, the characters are also pretty lifeless. Mainly Sonic, which Sonic doesn't even have an idle animation, he just stands there. Which is made weirder by the fact both the Avatar and Classic Sonic have idle animations, with the Avatar having several, and Classic Sonic growing impatient and doing his iconic little... It's strange, isn't it? Oh, but at least Sonic does a trick in the air when he homing attacks. The same one. Every time, not changing whatsoever. Oh, and his model changed, and people hated it. This started in Lost World, but is far more apparent in Forces. But I guess after Classic Sonic was so popular, Sega thought to make modern Sonic look more like Classic Sonic by making his quills shorter and making him a lighter blue. I think this is just a bad change, but I've learned to live with it, especially since this is carried over into both Frontiers and Shadow gens. And on the topic of models, the Avatar and all the different civilians just don't look good whatsoever, nor do they even really fit in with the rest of the cast. Like, none of the Avatar's options look particularly good, and no matter what, even if you don't clothe them, they're going to stick out like a sore thumb. And then the same is true for the civilians, which are basically just other avatars. But that doesn't matter, I guess. Infinite looks cool. One of the best parts of his character, apart from his theme song and concept. And final issue, the reuse of assets. Now, I'm not going to knock a game for reusing assets, especially since Sonic Forces is not the only Sonic game to do it. But what I am going to complain about is lazy reuse of assets. And for Forces, when it comes to reusing assets, I think it's definitely the worst Sonic game. There are some times where I think the reuse of assets is fine though. For example, I would not expect them to make a brand new character model or animations for existing characters. Like, why would they bother making a new model for Zavok instead of just using the one from Lost World? Especially when making a game in a single year. And then of course, they also edit pre-existing models to make new ones, such as previously mentioned Sonic himself, or the Death Egg robot, the Death Egg itself. But then the problems start to arise with Green Hill and Chemical Plant, which are only stages in the game for two painfully obvious reasons. First, nostalgia, though I think nostalgia runs out the fourth time you visit a location. And second, they could easily just take assets from Generations and call it a day, though I will give them credit as Green Hill and Chemical Plant aren't entirely reused models, namely the desert and industrial parts of Green Hill and the outside of Chemical Plant. But definitely the most egregious reuse of models is areas like the Egg Dragoon Mark II boss fight, or the Sandworm in Green Hill, areas where you could just tell, well, they need something to put there, so they just searched for something that kind of fit. So a little tidbit, if this is the Egg Dragoon Mark II, does that mean the Generations fight isn't actually a rematch against the Ultra Hyper Prototype 1, but instead the Ultra Hyper Prototype 2? Because they're literally just the same model. But anyways, Forces does reuse a lot of models, though that does not mean they don't make any new ones. And to be honest, visually, I think some of the highlights of Forces are the new stages. Areas like Sunset Heights, Null Space, or Imperial Tower all look pretty good. Then there are levels like Death Egg that both look great, but even hide little references in the background, like the boss Red Eye appearing quite a few times. Even then, levels like Spaceport and Arsenal Pyramid, which look practically unrecognizable from Chemical Plant or Green Hill, look great. Mystic Jungle is very forgettable though, and the only two areas I can easily remember are the entrance to Eggman's base and the snake isn't even memorable for a good reason. But I think the game looks good, but it's definitely a downgrade, and has many issues, but hey, at least it runs at a higher resolution and frame rate than Unleashed Your Generations. Okay, now we're getting to the bad parts already, which sucks considering the gameplay is probably the most important part of a game, and I think Forces most certainly has the worst gameplay of any Boost Sonic game. It has 4 different gameplay styles, starting with modern Sonic and Shadow. They have the main Boost Sonic moveset. The boost is as usual, though you got this new air boost, I guess that's what you'd call this. And the boost gauge is filled up by 2 methods, destroying badniks and collecting white wisps. The stomp and slide, which are pretty standard. The homing attack, though it's snappier than before, and I actually quite like the snappier homing attack. The double jump from colors, which really only serves the purpose of course correction now. The wall jump was given to the avatar, the light speed dash to the lightning wispin, and they lack the drift, despite the fact it seems Sonic Team really wanted to add the drift. And while this does seem like a semi-decent moveset, but you also have to consider the fact Sonic just does not feel good to control. He feels way too stiff, especially when boosting and jumping. And at least jumping is helped with a double jump, but without the drift, god, it's hard to make any sort of sharp turn. Evident as to why most of them have dash panels, which Forces is the Sonic game with the most dash panels, especially since Forces seems too embarrassed to actually let you play the game. But I do think if used properly, the boost gameplay could still be used well, such as in Network Terminal or Eggate, though it just so happens those stages use quite a bit of rails, or 2D, so the problem of how stiff Sonic isn't as much of a problem. But other than that, I don't think he controls well in this game, which is not good. Honestly, I think one of the most important things in a game is the controls, and if the controls are bad, oh boy, the entire game suffers from it. But I do think Sonic is serviceable. But hey, there are 3 more gameplay styles, maybe one of the others will be better. Oh, who am I kidding? First of the other 3, we have Classic Sonic, who has the old Genesis-style gameplay. Classic Sonic was brought back again after Generations to try and pander to the fans of the Genesis games. I don't think a single person wanted him in this game, or was excited when they revealed he was coming back. And Classic Sonic has pretty much the same moveset as he has in Mania, which makes sense, Mania only released a couple months prior to Forces. So what this entails is running, jumping, spin dashing, and the drop dash. Classic Sonic, of course, was brought back because of his popularity in Generations. However, Forces and Generations do not share the same physics engine. Generations was often criticized for Classic Sonic's physics being different from the Genesis games, and admittedly being worse. But Generations still had good physics. But Forces, they feel so bad. I really don't know how to describe it. Plus, Classic Sonic is all about gaining momentum. So why is it they put a pretty small cap on his momentum when running? You just can't go fast. In fact, I don't even think Classic Sonic gains momentum at all when running down slopes. Once again, I think the best example is at the start of Chemical Plant, where if you are just running, you will not get up the incline. However, since this is still a Sonic game, you still gotta go fast, so instead of just being able to go fast, you instead have to curl up into a ball and either just start rolling or spin dash, which will allow you to actually go fast and allow you to make it up the slope. You can only gain momentum if you start rolling. And heck, not even things like dash panels work correctly when Classic Sonic is just running. And his air control also sucks. And when you land, no matter how fast you're going, if you are not holding a direction, you will come to a complete stop, which also hurts since Classic Sonic has some of the more momentum-based platforming, since all his stages are 2D. And the spin dash is very powerful, and there are a lot more shortcuts designed for specifically the spin dash. And the drop dash is fine, but that does not help Classic Sonic whatsoever. But he has this ability. Why can he do that? And what purpose does this serve? I don't know. Also, while Sonic Forces is actually quite bug-free, yes, there are still bugs, but nowhere near as much as previous Sonic games. However, Classic Sonic... Hello, Sonic 4. I feel like a good chunk of the bugs in this game come from Classic Sonic, such as... Okay, this is just unacceptable. And overall, even with stages that are actually made with Classic Sonic's physics in mind, and honestly just good classic stages, it still doesn't feel good to play because Classic Sonic controls so terribly. And I can say without a doubt that out of the 4 playstyles, Classic Sonic is undoubtedly the worst. But there's actually a reason for why Classic Sonic's physics were changed so much from Generations. Because of the complaints. It is technically more accurate with things like bouncing off of enemies and rolling being a bit faster, but they created so many other problems that just make Classic Sonic control terribly. Though before we go on to the other two gameplay styles, we have to talk about Supersonic, which you unlock Supersonic by getting the 7 Chaos Emeralds. And how do you do that? Is it like the Genesis games where you have to obtain them from secret special stages, the adventure games where you just get them throughout the story, Colors or Lost World where you get them as a bonus for getting on all the red star ring? It's DLC. Free DLC at least. So Sonic Forces are initially released with not even a mention of Supersonic in-game. And then a month later they released the Supersonic DLC. How it works is once you complete a Boost, Classic, or Team stage, you can replay it, and if you want, you can switch to Supersonic. Which means once you hit 50 rings in the stage, you automatically transform into Supersonic. I don't know why it's automatic now. But for Classic Sonic, Supersonic works pretty standard. He is faster, I'm pretty sure he jumps higher, he is invincible, and he can attract rings when rolling. And when you turn into Classic Supersonic, you get to listen to a Genesis-style remix of Fist Bump. Now, for modern Sonic, it gets a bit weird because I don't think Supersonic is faster. I'm pretty sure he doesn't have the higher jump height. The two main things about modern Supersonic is the fact he is invincible, and now you have infinite boost. And I guess he can attract rings when boosting. Other than that, it's just Sonic. And this plays an instrumental version of Fist Bump. Also, I'll just get this out of the way, but I also mentioned that Shadow controls the same as Sonic, but also in the boost stages, you can switch between Sonic, Supersonic, and Shadow. Though you can't play as Sonic in Shadow stages, and Shadow is unavailable in the team stages. But, onto our next gameplay style, we have the only decent one. The Avatar, which is the brand new character as Sega decided to let you make your own OC in this game. Now, while I don't think the Avatar looks the greatest, they do play admittedly kind of decent. Now, they mostly control like the boost gameplay, though with a few key differences. They don't have the boost, which, considering how the boost was used in this game, that's actually a plus. The Avatar, instead of having the boost, has both a grapple, which kind of replaces the homing attack and can be used on specific targets, and also allows for drifting in specific segments, and allows for Sega to taking away your control cinematic shots. And, alongside the grapple, the Avatar has a Wispon, which is Sega's excuse to bring back the Wisps again, of which there are the returning Burst, Lightning, Cube, Asteroid, Drill, Hover, and Void. All with a respective Wispon, and instead of giving Sonic unique transformations, they instead act as a secondary power for the Avatar's Wispon, which could have been done better. You see, when going from a boost to an Avatar stage, the win button goes from X to RT. Of course, how to press the button depends on what the Wispon does. Do you hold it, press it, mash it, really mash it, or use Cube for some reason? Although I do have one nitpick, they changed the Wisp announcer, which now instead of announcing the Wisp as you use the ability, like in Colors, which meant he didn't say it again. Now it announces the Wisp as you collect it, which means
Isn't there anything we can do? Hover! 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 Hover!
But let's go through each Wispon. I will try and rapid fire them. Burst acts like a flamethrower for its main ability, and when you collect a Burst Wisp, you can create explosions that boost you upwards. Lightning is a whip, and when collecting a Lightning Wisp, you can essentially use the Lightspeed Dash. Cube lets you slam into the ground and turn enemies into cubes that give you blue rings, and the special ability has you create a bunch of blue cubes under you. Asteroid gives you a bunch of clones which you can shoot at enemies, and the special ability is just invincibility. Drill, you can charge up for a massive attack, and its special has you drill through the ground and up walls at a rapid speed. Hover blows away enemies, and the special both allows you to fly and will automatically save you if you fall into a pit. And Void shoots out a black hole to suck in both enemies and rings, and has you teleport in the direction you hold the left stick in for its special. You can only bring one at a time in each level, though with the Rent an Avatar, or you can technically bring another with a second Wispon. But other than that, I actually kind of like the Wispons. Also, a weird quirk with the Wispins is some of them offer invincibility while attacking, most noticeable with Drill. The avatar can also be made different animals when you first create them, each giving you a different special ability. The bear will make enemies blow away upon a wire attack, the bird will let you double jump, the rabbit extends invincibility after taking damage, the cat lets you hold on to rings after taking damage, the dog lets you start with rings after dying, the wolf draws in rings, and the hedgehog has dropped rings stay for longer. Other than that, they control near identically to modern Sonic, just without the boost and double jump, which the boost was the worst part of modern Sonic. And yes, that does mean the avatar does have some problems, mostly being way too stiff. However, the stiffness was exacerbated by the boost, which was highly emphasized in the boost levels. The avatar just does not have that problem. Plus, I kind of find it satisfying to actually do well as the avatar far more than modern or classic Sonic. Oh, and one final thing, the avatar's Wispin can come with extra abilities such as giving you bonus points for various different things or gaining a boost of speed after landing. Don't use that one. The avatar also has DLC tied to them, but that's just costumes, it does not affect gameplay. So we can create wonderful OCs such as Even Faker, Crazy Carl, Persona 5 the Not Cat, Ball the Bear, Poyo the Poyo, Irrelevant the Cat, and Jet Set the Hawk. Then we have our final playstyle, which is both Sonic and the Avatar at the same time, combining both of their movesets so you have the boost, the grapple, and the Wispin at the same time. But there is one thing this gameplay style has that neither Sonic or the Avatar has alone, and that is the double boost, which is meh. It hardly counts as a game mechanic, it's just a QTE section that is impossible to fail. In every team stage, there is one area where Sonic and Avatar join forces and combine their powers to blast through a good chunk of the stage. It is treated like a quick time event. However, that's pretty much the peak of gameplay for these segments, and other than that, there is not much to talk about for this gameplay style. How I would rank these four gameplay styles goes Classic, Boost, Team, and the Avatar. And to recap, the Boost gameplay is mediocre at best, Classic is horrible, the Avatar is pretty decent, and the Team gameplay is only slightly better than the Boost gameplay. A game's levels are the natural extension of a game's moveset and physics. Good levels take advantage of the character's moveset and physics in fun and interesting ways, yada yada yada, these suck too. There are 33 stages, 26 if you don't count the 7 bosses. Of those 26 stages, there are 10 boost stages, which are easily the worst boost stages, though some of them are fine. 6 classic stages. I feel like the classic stages have decent yet flawed level designs, but they are mostly brought down by classic Sonic himself. There are 7 Avatar stages, which are actually pretty decent except one. And then there are only 3 team levels, which vary quite a bit. Now, I'm not going to cover every single stage in this video, I'm just going to mainly talk about the strengths and weaknesses these stages have collectively, while bringing up a couple specific stages that are particularly bad or good. But first, let me tell you a little fun fact about this game. This game had only 3 level designers, 2 of which have never worked on a mainline Sonic game before, and the lead had only worked on Lost World. Just thought you should know that before we started. Let's start with the more general problems. First, the levels are short, with most ranging between 1 to 2 minutes. And then rarely a level can get to 2 minutes 30 seconds, which is definitely pretty short. Most other Sonic games have much longer levels. Unleashed in 06 levels would never be caught dead being that short. The Adventure and Genesis games generally have decently long levels, and even the longer Forces levels are on the shorter side of the 2 generations and colors. But I think there is only one mainline Sonic game with shorter levels than Forces, and that is Frontiers. A lot of Sonic Forces stages end before they even get started, and even the decent ones like Egggate just end as they start getting good. And even then, some of these stages have padding like the Snake in Luminous Forest, the Freight Train in Spaceport, the fact Iron Fortress has an auto-scroll section for some reason. And I mean, every Sonic game, especially the Boost games, have their padding, but Forces definitely has it worse. Another big problem in my opinion is just how many QTEs there are, such as the aforementioned Snake and Freight Train. Now, some of these are honestly fine. We can keep things like taking down the Crab and the Death Egg Robot. Those make sense and honestly aren't too invasive. On the other hand, why did they spend so much time animating your OC almost getting run over? Or Sonic getting eaten? And the double boost, as said before, is basically just a QTE section. Though, the only one that's really bad is Arsenal Pyramid, and maybe Null Spaces. And honestly, I just don't like QTEs in my Sonic stages, with an exception for how Unleashed handles its QTEs. And I feel like their time would have been better spent actually making the level better, rather than putting a cutscene sometimes in the middle of a level. Another pretty big problem is the massive amounts of automation, or generally taking away control. One big offender is the massive overuse of dash panels, often used in places like sharp turns since we don't have the drift. Though for turns like this, there are also often invisible triggers to make Sonic pretty much automatically make the turn. A similar thing is found in stages with the Avatar, by having the Avatar drift, kind of, during specific sharp turns. It's only a real gameplay mechanic in specifically Prison Hall, and every other time it's just to look cool, I guess. And in those stages as well, there is yellow wire targets, which are like the red ones, except they are automatic now. Most of the time I think it's fine, like when they use it to take the player to a different area. But sometimes, was this really necessary? Finally, automation is far less common in classic stages, but that does not mean it's not present. Also to add, Sonic Forces will take away specific controls during specific sections. An example is in Sunset Heights, where it just does not let you jump while running up the stairs, instead of letting you ramp off them like every other boost game probably would have done. The next big problem is that most of these stages are far more simplistic and linear than previous Sonic stages, which Sonic stages are known for having many different shortcuts and alternate paths in them, and it's up to you to learn and memorize the fastest way through. Forces, it doesn't do that as much. There are a couple stages that don't even have alternate paths. Now this mostly goes for the 3D segments, and especially the boost stages, which Forces does have its moment, I will admit, with levels like Network Terminal or Egg Gate. But there are even more levels where the alternate paths are just completely mindless or even just pointless. Like, is there any reason for the alternate paths in Mortar Canyon? They are all just longer than the easier main path. Now, the Avatar levels do have a decent amount of alternate paths, and some of them are your standard alternate paths that can be accessed just by exploring the level and playing well. But then there is the other 75% of alternate paths, which all use the Wispin, which has a couple different problems. First, the fact you only use one Wisp at a time, depending on what Wispin you have. Yes, you can use the Rent-A-Hero to get two, but you can still only use one at a time. Entire alternate paths will be locked away from you just because you didn't bring the right Wispin. I mean, God forbid you use Asteroid or Void, the Wispins that have pretty much zero alternate routes. Cube is so niche and situational, and even at that, all the other Wispins are better choices. Drill has some use cases, but is generally just the same path but a bit faster. Honestly, if you want the alternate routes, there is almost no reason to not switch off Burst, Lightning, or Hover, which then opens up the other problems, as these routes are pretty mindless and very boring. Of the three, Burst is the best, as you actually need to time and somewhat aim your, bursts. Hover is like Burst, but instead of actually having to have proper timing, you just hold the button. And then there is Lightning.
So they're building weapons here, huh? Making everyone work like robots. It'll be Eggman's turn to get pushed around when I get a hold of him.
I don't think there is a single interesting or fun thing about doing this. Then the final problem is generally these are the main shortcuts for both the Avatar and Team levels. For example, Burst or Lightning will take you through the entirety of Arsenal Pyramid. Hover will take you through Imperial Tower. The one segment on land in Aqua Road is a mess. And every single Avatar and Team level just has tons and tons of these types of shortcuts that are generally just as or more mindless than the main path. Then there are the classic stages, which are actually mostly fine in terms of alternate paths and shortcuts. The only problem stages are Green Hill for its very boring and uninteresting shortcuts, and Iron Fortress, which doesn't even have any. And on to the final problem, the stages, for the most part, just have bad level design. I know, shocking with how much I've been praising this game. There are so many different bad elements like the aforementioned lack of alternate routes, the stages that are practically straight lines, the enemy spam, the fact the enemies are at most treated just as bowling pins, the pretty mindless platforming, and just how hand-holdy it is. There are just so many things bad about these levels. Now, at worst, we have insanely boring and terribly made levels like Aqua Road, Arsenal Pyramid, Casino Fortress, or Luminous Forest. There are just some mediocre levels like Sunset Heights, Green Hill, Park Avenue, or Lost Valley. But then there are actually some pretty decent levels like Eggate, Network Terminal, admittedly most of the classic levels, Null Space, or Imperial Tower. Though even the admittedly decent levels do have their problems, mostly the lack of difficulty or short length, but honestly Forces does have some good levels. They are just mostly eclipsed by the amount of mediocre, just plain bad levels. But that's not all, we also have the Challenge Acts and Secret stages. These take pre-existing layouts in the game and edit them to make them harder and introduce a new and semi-interesting gimmick that does not exist in the main game, like these bombs or vanish platforms. These mostly remind me of Sonic Generations Challenge Acts, which I never really cared much about those either, and these are slightly worse. There's also not a single challenge act for classic Sonic. Then finally we have the 3 Shadow levels in the Shadow DLC. These are like the challenge acts, having harder and more interesting versions of pre-existing levels, specifically taking from Sunset Heights, Aqua Road, and Guardian Rock. Enemy territory and virtual reality are pretty decent, much better than most of the stages on the base game, though still not on the same level as other Sonic game stages. Eggman's facility is not that good though, just a slightly more interesting Aqua Road. And that's about it for the levels. The bosses. They suck. Pretty badly. Now I'm just gonna quickly go over each boss fight. There are 7 fights in total, with 3 bosses for Modern Sonic, 2 for Classic, 2 for the Avatar, and 2 for Sonic and the Avatar. Going in order, we have Zavok for Modern Sonic. It's not the worst boss fight, just dodge his attacks and wait till he slams the ground to launch you up so you can attack him. Then we have Infinite's first fight, once again as Modern Sonic. You boost towards him on a snake while he sends Phantom Ruby based attacks at you, both damaging you and sending you to the Virtual Boy realm where you have to dodge extra obstacles for a short while. You gotta boost towards Infinite to attack him, and once you reach the end of the snake you'll launch off and Infinite will create clones for you to homing attack to the end and hit him. Though this boss is so easy, they have to actively stop you from defeating Infinite before his final attack. Next is the first classic boss, the Egg Dragoon. The first phase is a fake out against the Egg Wrecker, except now it has a saw. Going to phase 2, Eggman brings out the Egg Dragoon and has 3 attacks. He'll try and shoot you, or launch a bunch of skewers at you, and these 2 attacks are both very easy to dodge. What makes this fight even easier is his third attack, where he launches debris and, most importantly, boulders at you, which you can launch back at him. It's the main way of attack. Though, through the simple act of attacking him, you can cheese the entire fight. As when you attack the Egg Dragoon, he just stops doing whatever attack he was currently doing and then goes right to the next, so you can keep hitting him till he sends more boulders. This is my least favorite fight in the game. The next boss is Infinite's second fight, which has the Avatar. The first phase just has Infinite floating around the arena while shooting homing, I guess, tendrils. If they hit you, it'll cause the same effect as getting hit in Infinite's first fight. Eventually he will charge you, and I hope for his sake you don't have Burst or Asteroid equipped. For his second phase, you start having to dodge entire walls of cubes. Infinite will hang out in the background, and egg pawns will also come from the background to try and hit you. Still, Infinite will fold at just a little bit of arson. Next is Metal Sonic, a high-speed fight with both Sonic and the Avatar. You chase after Metal Sonic, dodging his few attacks and making sure to maintain your boost, and wait for a chance to attack him. Or just shoot him, that works too. Also, you do have to keep going. If you are too slow, you will be killed by a wall of phantom cubes. The next fight is Infinite's final fight. It starts as just a modern Sonic fight for the first phase, and it's just the Metal Sonic fight again. Except instead of this attack, you have a slightly harder version that takes advantage of the Phantom Ruby's ability to send you to the Virtual Boy. For the second phase, the Avatar joins the fight, and now it's exactly like the Metal Sonic fight. Then there is the final boss, the Death Egg Robot. I know, looks just like he did in Sonic 2. This boss uses all the characters, starting with Classic Sonic. The first phase is similar to the Egg Dragoon fight, but now he has a laser. And now, the floor is these purple blocks that slowly disappear and reappear to the left, and eventually the right. And it can be destroyed by the boss's attacks, and you can't cheese the fight by waiting to launch boulders, as they will go right through the platform. Instead, you have to juggle the boulder with the Death Egg Robot. And honestly, this improves the fight quite drastically, and I prefer it quite a lot to the Egg Dragoon fight. The second phase has the Avatar. You're on this platform, the Death Egg Robot will attack you in various manners, and well, it folds as easily as Infinite. The third phase technically has you playing as all three characters, but you don't have the abilities of the Avatar or Classic Sonic, just modern. But this phase has you boosting towards the Death Egg Robot so you can homing attack him several times, but he has a couple attacks to throw at you. A laser, he sweeps across the screen. He can spawn cubes you have to dodge, and he is just a negative Wisp armor from Sonic Colors. Pretty much the exact same boss fight with only one difference. Instead of this attack using spikes, he has this attack that uses a rocket that would fit quite perfectly in the Colors fight. And at the end, instead of using
Final Color Blaster,
you perform the coveted triple boost. These bosses are not that good. There are a couple semi-decent ones. I think the final boss is fine, except for the fact it's just the negative Wisp armor. And Infinite's second fight is also fine, but the rest are forgettable, too easy, or just plain bad. But let's get on to our final segment. The story. God, the story. I think the story is easily the worst part of Sonic Forces, and is the hardest part to defend, or even find good aspects of it. Before we get started, I'd like to mention how much of a skill it must be to fully kill off hype for a game's story for many people by simply announcing that you wrote it. Now, I'm not saying it's entirely Warren's fault, the story really sucks. Now, he is probably a contributing factor, especially considering his previous Sonic work, but the guy who actually wrote the story and script was Makoto Goya, a guy who had never wrote anything for Sonic before. There was also Itaro Toyoda, I don't know how to pronounce that, who also worked on the script and had actually worked on Sonic games before, and Ken Pontac, who was just attributed to as a writer. But anyways, the best part of the story is the plot summary. The story is about Eggman and his new ultimate weapon, and Eggman, according to Orbot, means business this time. And with his new weapon, and a bunch of returning villains, Eggman finally defeats and seemingly kills Sonic, leading to him taking over the world in a 6-month-long war between the Eggman Empire and the Resistance, consisting of most of Sonic's friends and a new character you can create. Turns out Sonic's still alive, and with the combined forces of Sonic the Avatar, Sonic's friends, and random civilians, you can take back the world from Eggman. And Classic Sonic is here for marketing, though I don't think a single person was excited for Classic Sonic coming back 3 months after Classic Sonic came back. But with just that short explanation, the overall story itself seems fine, and really, it is. The real problem is how the actual full story plays out. We will just go over the problems one by one, again starting with the fact the game loves to rush or brush over plot points, or story beats. Most notably, Sonic's death. Now, one would think they would keep Sonic still being alive a secret for at least a couple levels, perhaps up until Prison Hall, where Sonic is released from prison, or heck, even longer. But no. We do the first level, we get this cutscene we'll be returning to a couple more times. Sonic dies, we see the Resistance make our avatar, and
I just received some incredible news. Sonic is alive.
you don't even get to the second stage before everyone already knows Sonic is still alive. He has just been tortured for 6 months. There is no reason for them to have even included this plot point. It has no weight except for maybe Vector explaining how it's been hard without Sonic's help. And Tails' little side story. Sonic dying wasn't even in the trailers. I think the only real reason for this is so the writers didn't have to write an explanation as to why it would take 6 months for the Resistance to rescue Sonic if they had known he was still alive. Another aspect of the story that can be considered rushed or brushed over is Eggman conquering the world. It's literally just a black screen with text telling you he did so. Which then leads us to another issue with the game's story. Forces loves to tell, not show. Or heck, sometimes it doesn't even tell, and instead you need outside sources to better explain the plot of Sonic Forces. Some examples are how Sonic has been tortured for 6 months, and they might as well have omitted that line, like his death. It really is not explored or even brought up later. Sonic shows absolutely no signs of being tortured for 6 months, apart from joking about it. At the very least, they could have made Sonic a little scuffed up in this scene, but no, he's perfectly fine. Another one is how Tails is said to have lost it, which later, apart from the
Sonic, help me!
Tails is fine. Apart from being a coward now, Tails is acting pretty normal. Though, actually, both of those problems are just problems with the localization. The mentioning of Sonic's torture and Tails losing it, I'm pretty sure are not present in the Japanese version. Instead, Sonic was only captured, though I still think presumed to be dead, and Tails had just gone missing. Still, those are problems with the story we did end up getting. This game also likes to tell you the struggles the Resistance is facing or how devastating Eggman conquering the world is, but once again, we aren't really shown this. Anything about the Resistance's struggles are only in dialogue.
Without Sonic, the people are losing hope and giving into despair.
And while yes, we do see some of the effects of Eggman's takeover, such as the city under siege or Green Hill being turned into a desert, which... Wait a minute. Both of these areas are just as bad before the war started, with Green Hill already being a desert and heck, Sonic joking about it, and enemy territory showing that the city's already destroyed. Heck, even the Death Egg robots were seemingly already deployed. We don't get to see a world before it was destroyed by Eggman because it was already destroyed when the game starts. It would have been so much better if Green Hill or the small glimpse of the city were there in their full glory before letting us see them ruined in Ghost Town and Arsenal Pyramid. Would have been an actually smart use of the 6-month time skip. Well, I guess we do get to see Green Hill before it was destroyed. We just have to play any other Sonic game with Green Hill, which shouldn't be a requirement. Which there are other aspects of the game that are just not explained actually in-game. Instead, later explained in prequel comics or specific YouTube videos. Some topics aren't as important, like how Eggman got the Phantom Ruby or how Omega got destroyed. But then we have some more major things like Infinite's entire motivation to work with Eggman or why Silver is even here in the first place. These are just not addressed in the main game. Then we have another pretty big issue. The game's story and especially the trailers set up this game to have a rather serious tone, such as having Sonic die or be tortured. But it's like they set up a rather serious topic or try to add tension, but then just use it for comedy. Sometimes these comedic scenes are fine, for example the scene with Knuckles and Charmy at the beginning of the game, that's fine. Sonic treating Infinite like a joke after having it handed to him 6 months prior is not so fine. Sonic has a little motivational speech about fixing the real world followed up by... Oh, what does Sonic have to say about his apparently favorite location being completely destroyed by Eggman?
There's sand everywhere. Green Hill's looking a lot more like Sand Hill right now.
It's like Sonic Forces wants to appeal to the Sonic fans who wanted a more serious story again, so they introduce some serious topics. But then it's completely ruined by the fact they tried to shove the same comedy we've been getting since Colors into every scene. Plus, what does not help is a total lack of respect it gives to pretty much the entire cast of characters, which I don't think a single character was written particularly well in this game. Some are worse than others. Now, I'm not going to go into the problems with every single character, but let's start with the Avatar, which is pretty much Sega trying to appeal to the people on DeviantArt who wanted their OC in an actual Sonic game. And honestly, the Avatar is a pretty uninteresting character. A bland backstory, forgettable development, his friendship with Sonic feels shallow, and the literal only thing in my opinion that is keeping the Avatar from being one of the most forgettable Sonic characters is the fact they are a customizable character. If they did not have that, they would be so uninteresting. Then a pretty major problem is half the supporting cast doesn't even do anything, or if they do, it's just told to us. Like, this game pretty much tells us at the beginning of the story that without Sonic, every other character is pretty much useless and has made zero progress in 6 months. And apparently we're just sitting around waiting for a miracle rather than actually doing something. And then there's Shadow. Shadow bullied Infinite and implied he killed Infinite's squad, inadvertently kind of caused all this, disappeared for 6 months while his phantom copy wreaked havoc, then just randomly appeared to kick himself and give us conflicting data about the phantom copies. Big, Blaze, and Cream don't even appear, though I would consider that lucky. The phantom copies of Metal, Sonic, Chaos, Shadow, and Zavok barely do anything either. Zavok is the only one to get dialogue, or heck, make a sound. There's not even a from Metal or a from Chaos. And excluding the first and final cutscenes, they all get at most one cutscene. And Zavok and Metal were lucky to even get boss fights, despite the fact we were promised all of them would get boss fights. Zavok is gone after the 5th level, Metal doesn't even get a cutscene and only gets mentioned right before he shows up in Red Gate Bridge. Shadow at least has some plot relevance but only shows up once around the midpoint of the game. And Chaos gets one-tapped by Classic Sonic in the worst scene in the game that happens right before the 3rd level. Which, 2 fun facts actually, Chaos's model is not in the game files due to only appearing in pre-rendered cutscenes, and Mephiles was actually going to be one of the Phantom copies before being scrapped, though he wasn't going to be a part of the main group, instead only being mentioned during the final battle. Also, Sonic and Eggman are not that important to mention. I feel like they are written as well as they have been since Colors, which I don't think is that good anyways. But these characters, they weren't done as dirty as some of the others, such as...
Whoa, Chaos! Sonic, help me!
What the happened here? Tails, Sonic's sidekick, best friend, and essentially little brother. He has been there since Sonic 2, and even when nearly all of Sonic's other friends went missing after 06, Tails was still there. And part of his original character arc started in the adventure games was him learning to be more independent and not rely on Sonic as much, leading to him both saving Station Square by himself, and when Sonic seemingly died in SA2, Tails didn't just sit back and cower, he continued to fight. Now, how was he in Forces?
Sonic!
You get the idea. Well, now when Sonic seemingly died, he just sits back and cowers at the mere sight of Chaos Zero. Now, I have seen some people defend this as Tails not being in the right mind, demoralized after Sonic's death, feeling guilty for Sonic's death, and I guess I could see where those are coming from, if it wasn't for the previously mentioned SA2. And even then, I don't think anyone could defend this scene where Tails is cowering before a bunch of egg pawns until Sonic shows up. And even then, he still does nothing. And later, when Sonic gets jumped by Infinite and the Phantom copies, Tails just sits there on his little iPad while Sonic once again gets his handed to him. The only reason Tails does anything in this game is because Classic Sonic shows up, so Tails can entirely depend on him. Now, yes, Tails definitely does some things during the main story, mainly gathering information such as Eggman's plan or how the Phantom Ruby works. Though he still continues to be so frustrating throughout the game. When Eggman is about to send Sonic to null space, what is Tails' reaction? Hide. And near the end of the game, there is this scene where everyone is fighting off hordes of the Phantom copies, and while the scene is not that good, there is also someone conspicuously absent from the fight. Or rather, he is there, but he's not doing anything. Even Omega Deus Ex Machinas his way into the final fight so he could do something. But Tails just sits there in the back. The only thing that Tails contributes to the final battle is telling the Avatar they can use the Phantom Ruby prototype to stop the sun from falling. And the game ends with Tails being a bit disappointed that classic Sonic has to leave because I guess he'll miss him. Tails went from an actually competent and independent person to becoming an utter coward that can't function if Sonic is 10 feet away from him, and that's just frustrating. At least Frontiers later addressed this and practically just apologized for how he acted in Forces. And I mean, at least he's not as bad as he was in Lost World, where he basically existed to create conflict and then at the end was rewarded for it. But Tails isn't the only character with horrible writing. The game's main antagonist, or rather what should have been the main antagonist. And to start this, I like the idea of Infinite. His design is cool. His theme song is fitting. And he definitely has potential to be a very good character. But that's it. Potential. That's about all the good stuff I could say about him. First, let's get on to his backstory, which the game itself is a little inconsistent on. In the main game, Infinite is often portrayed as a machine built by Eggman.
Unlike mechs, I can grow.
This is where Eggman built Infinite. It's so sad. What a lonely place to be brought into the world.
Every defeat, every humiliation at the Hedgehog's hands will be returned 1,000-fold by my unstoppable creation.
However, Shadow's story lets us know that this is apparently not the case, and instead Infinite was just a normal, selfish, arrogant, narcissistic jackal. Before he was beat up by Shadow and maybe had his squad killed by Shadow, it's not explicitly stated, which I guess just set him off the deep end, which not only contradicts the whole mech thing going on in the base game, but is also not a good backstory, and just makes him look kinda pathetic. Since he lets Shadow get to him this much. And then in the base game, Infinite is also not well written. At first he is honestly fine, they treat him as a strong, mysterious new foe who easily takes down Sonic. And the scene where he taunts the Avatar also makes him seem rather threatening, though inconsistent that he conveniently lets this person live while he killed everyone else. Plus, later in the game, right before his second boss fight, he has this scene with the Avatar, which I also think is pretty good. However, a lot of Infinite's other scenes, well, let's just say he's very inconsistent, such as how on multiple occasions he says, or even heck, surprisingly enough, shows us that he is perfectly okay with killing anyone in his way.
There is no reason to resist. Savior is no. Fine. I will teach you fear, then pain, and then, well, at least the fear and pain will end. This wasn't part of my agenda, but I'm always happy to crush a hero. It keeps the rabble in line, shows them that there is no hope.
And then is also shown to be against the idea of tactical retreats.
Forces. And by tactical retreat, you mean to say, flee with our tails between our legs. I'm quite displeased about this, Doctor.
But then later, lets both Sonic and the Avatar live despite them being at his mercy, and at many points in the game it's pointed out just how powerful Infinite is, and before his final fight, is shown overpowering literally every member of the Resistance. Sonic hasn't won a 1v1 with him, he was about to kill Silver, and the only reason the Avatar survived this encounter with Infinite is the Phantom Ruby prototype, which he lost after Infinite summoned the sun. Plus, it's stated that Infinite could create infinite amounts of Phantom copies. The copies are just as strong as the originals. He isn't limited to these 4, and he can make copies of himself. He can also send people to a place called Null Space, which is apparently impossible to escape, though Sonic and the Avatar instantly break out of it. Which, all this is to say, Infinite is very powerful and has not lost a fight yet. And in his third fight, he is very easily beaten because he has no friends. And due to bad writing, most of the story, he comes off as nothing more than pathetic. Heck, after Sonic breaks out of prison, he just does not take Infinite seriously whatsoever. So why should I take Infinite seriously if Sonic, the guy who Infinite just beat up, isn't taking him seriously? And the game keeps making him look like a pushover who is all bark no bite when he is shown to have quite a strong bite, yet is easily beaten because he doesn't have friends. And of course, he isn't just defeated, he just straight up dies and doesn't even get the chance to be the game's final boss like he should have been. Eggman just steps in to become even more powerful, yet still be beaten just as easily. Now, I do honestly think Infinite does have potential to be a good villain. He has a cool design, cool powers. If they expand on his backstory, they could fix that. And he has some good characterization. It's just the writing of Sonic Forces utterly ruins him and makes him look like an inconsistent, pathetic edgelord. But hey, at least he actually fits in the game's story, unlike classic Sonic. As if he didn't ruin this game enough. Though I guess saying that in this instance is a bit harsh. Sega, because Generations was popular, decided to shove Classic Sonic into this game as well. We know this, but what does Classic Sonic add to the story of Sonic Forces? Well, he's here to be someone Tails can relentlessly follow. That's about it. At first, Classic Sonic's story just has him wandering around aimlessly with Tails until they get to Green Hill so Tails can learn Eggman has big plans and that Sonic is still alive. Then Classic Sonic is a minor annoyance to Eggman for a few seconds, then they regroup with everyone else. We get this hilarious line,
It's been generations since I seen you. You okay?
and then Classic Sonic does 2 missions for the Resistance, and really the only important one being destroying the Death Egg, which modern Sonic could have done. He was already in the spaceport. The story honestly would not have been all too different if Classic Sonic wasn't even in the game. Just have Tails randomly show up like Shadow did, have someone else do these 2 missions, and cut out this scene, and everything is the same. And it's quite evident that Classic Sonic wasn't even intended to be in this game, evident by his lackluster role in the story, having the lowest amount of levels, not even appearing in any challenge or secret levels. Heck, he didn't even appear in any concept art. He was just added because he was popular in Generations plus easy cross-promotion with Mania. Which from Classic Sonic's perspective, Forces takes place right in between Mania's story and Encore mode. But even then, Classic Sonic randomly being shoved into the story is not the worst part. No. The worst part is they went and messed with the continuity, which every Sonic fan should know. Classic Sonic is Sonic from the past. That is made quite clear in Generations, and it made sense. What doesn't make sense is...
Oh, you're that Sonic from another dimension, aren't you?
You've got a lot of nerve for a bite-sized Sonic from another dimension.
Why? Suddenly now in Sonic Forces, Classic Sonic is from another dimension. Now there are 2 reasons for this line. A, I've seen some people online say it's just a joke because, you know, Classic Sonic's 2D and modern is 3D. B, this was done by the creators on purpose to try and appease the Classic Sonic fan by completely separating the classic timeline from the modern timeline. How does entirely alienating the classic games from the greater timeline appeal Classic Sonic fans? I don't know. It does not even work with the lore due to especially the adventure games referencing the classic timeline. This was just a bad idea, and it spawned a very popular fan theory that Generations caused a split in the timeline, and Mania is the result of that split. This theory has since been disproven by the creators, and I think Classic Sonic is just back to being Sonic from the past, I hope. But really, the only thing Classic Sonic truly adds to Sonic Forces is temporarily making the timeline more confusing, and other than that, nothing else. Which brings us to the conclusion of this segment. Sonic Forces' story has some good ideas. Don't get me wrong, the overall plot in Infinite had great potential. But it's just killed by bad writing, bad characterization, inconsistencies, plot holes. It was rushed. We barely got to see anything. Classic Sonic. Infinite was a bad villain. It had a complete tonal mismatch and has pretty much disrespected a lot of the Sonic timeline and characters. I don't like Sonic Forces. I never will truly like Sonic Forces. But in doing this video, I have come to a realization. Sonic Forces is not the worst Sonic game. It is far from being the worst Sonic game. As I replayed Sonic Forces for this video, I slowly started to understand this game isn't terrible. It has terrible things about it, like the story, classic Sonic, quite a few of the levels, but it also has some good in it. Some decent ideas both in the story and gameplay. Playing as Sonic in the Avatar can be decently fun. The music if you like synth. And there are some really fun, albeit short levels. But then the rest of this game is just mid. The graphics, most levels, the boss fights, cutscenes, the Avatar. This game is a horribly mixed bag of mostly mid, but with some good aspects. But also some terrible aspects. The good doesn't save the game, but the terrible also doesn't entirely ruin it. This game is the definition of a 6 out of 10, or well, maybe a 5 out of 10. But why does it get so much hate? Well, I think it's the marketing. Back when this game came out, Sonic was in a nowhere near as good situation as he is now. The last good Sonic game was Generations in 2011, and that was followed up by Lost World and the Boom series. Now, Lost World at best just didn't live up to the expectations Generations had set, and Sonic Boom nearly killed the franchise's reputation. And Sega had not really been taking Sonic stories seriously since Sonic Unleashed back in 2008. But now, Sega was advertising Sonic Forces, and they went above and beyond to advertise this game. Tons of trailers, gameplay previews, tons of posts on things like Twitter, Sonic Forces Speed Battle. The game was advertised to have a much darker and more serious tone like the fans wanted. Villains coming back, a really cool looking new villain. There were tons of bland collaborations such as Chuck E. Cheese, or Hooters. There were also false advertisements such as Chaos being a boss fight, despite... Plus, just 2 months prior, Sonic Mania had released, and this is a fan-favorite Sonic game. So with all this combined, opinions and expectations for Sonic were much higher than they had been in such a long time. But that's the thing, expectations don't always match reality. And when we all expected this Sonic game to bring Sonic back, to save the franchise from the endless stairs it had been falling down since 2006, and we got Sonic Forces. A game that did not meet expectations whatsoever. We got the most mid-game imaginable at the time where everyone expected a masterpiece. And that's where I think the hate comes from. People were bitter and betrayed, so their hatred for the game had gotten completely overblown when this game didn't deserve that much hate. But for people who came in with lower or even bad expectations, they would get a semi-enjoyable though mostly still boring experience. And for me, when I played this game again for the video, I was surprised. It wasn't as bad as I first thought it was. I gave it another chance and I enjoyed myself a little bit. So for that, I just have to say, I am sorry. I am sorry, Sonic Forces. You are not the worst Sonic game. Far from it. And adding you to my tier list of all the Sonic games I've already ranked, I have to give you a D tier. I still don't like Forces.